"What is the matter with thee, my daughter?" he asked. "If I had only a spring here," said she, putting her hand on her heart, "I would not love you as I do, father." Master Zacharias looked intently at Gerund and did not reply. Suddenly he uttered a cry, carried his hand eagerly to his heart, and fell fainting on his old leathern chair. "Father, what is the matter? Father, what is the matter?" "Help!" cried Aubert, Scholastique. But Scholastique did not come at once. Someone was knocking at the front door. She had gone to open it, and when she returned to the shop, before she could open her mouth, the old watchmaker, having recovered his senses, spoke. "I divine, my old Scholastique, that you bring me still another of those accursed watches which have stopped." "Lord, it is true enough," replied Scholastique, handing a watch to Aubert. "My heart could not be mistaken," said the old man with a sigh. Meanwhile Aubert carefully wound up the watch, but it would not go. Chapter 3. A Strange Visit. Poor Gerund would have lost her life with that of her father, had it not been for the thought of Aubert, who still attached her to the world. The old watchmaker was, little by little, passing away. His faculties evidently grew more feeble, as he concentrated them on a single thought. By a sad association of ideas, he referred everything to his monomania, and a human existence seemed to have departed from him, to give place to the extranatural existence of the intermediate powers. Moreover, certain malicious rivals revived the sinister rumors which had spread concerning his labors. The news of the strange derangements which his watches betrayed had a prodigious effect upon the master clockmakers of Geneva. What signified this sudden paralysis of their wheels, and why these strange relations which they seemed to have with the old man's life? These were the kind of mysteries which people never contemplate without a secret terror. In the various classes of the town, from the apprentice to the great lord who used the watches of the old horologist, there was no one who could not himself judge of the singularity of the fact. The citizens wished, but in vain, to get to see Master Zacharias. He fell very ill, and this enabled his daughter to withdraw him from those incessant visits which had degenerated into reproaches and recriminations. Medicines and physicians were powerless in presence of this organic wasting away, the cause of which could not be discovered. It sometimes seemed as if the old man's heart had ceased to beat, then the pulsations were resumed with an alarming irregularity. A custom existed in those days of publicly exhibiting the works of the masters. The heads of the various corporations sought to distinguish themselves by the novelty or the perfection of their productions. And it was among these that the condition of Master Zacharias excited the most lively, because most interested, commiseration. His rivals pitied him the more willingly because they feared him the less. They never forgot the old man's success, when he exhibited his magnificent clocks with moving figures, his repeaters, which provoked general admiration, and commanded such high prices in the cities of France, Switzerland, and Germany. Meanwhile, thanks to the constant and tender care of Gerund and Aubert, his strength seemed to return a little, and in the tranquillity in which his convalescence left him, he succeeded in detaching himself from the thoughts which had absorbed him. As soon as he could walk, his daughter lured him away from the house, which was still besieged with dissatisfied customers. Aubert remained in the shop, vainly adjusting and readjusting the rebel watches, and the poor boy, completely mystified, sometimes covered his face with his hands, fearful that he, like his master, might go mad. Jaren led her father towards the more pleasant promenades of the town. With his arm resting on hers, she conducted him sometimes through the quarter of St. Antoine, the view from which extends towards the Coligny Hill, and over the lake. On fine mornings, they caught sight of the gigantic peaks of Mount Buet against the horizon. Jaren pointed out these spots to her father, who had well nigh forgotten even their names. His memory wandered, and he took a childish interest in learning anew what had passed from his mind. Master Zacharias leaned upon his daughter, and the two heads, one white as snow and the other covered with rich golden tresses, met in the same ray of sunlight. So it came about that the old watchmaker at last perceived that he was not alone in the world. As he looked upon his young and lovely daughter, and on himself old and broken, he reflected that after his death she would be left alone without support. Many of the young mechanics of Geneva had already sought to win Jaren's love, but none of them had succeeded in gaining access to the impenetrable retreat of the watchmaker's household. It was natural, then, that during this lucid interval, the old man's choice should fall on Aubert Thun. Once struck with this thought, He remarked to himself that this young couple had been brought up with the same ideas and the same beliefs, and the oscillations of their hearts seemed to him, as he said one day to Scholastique, isochronous. The old servant, literally delighted with the word, though she did not understand it, swore by her holy patron, saint that the whole town should hear it within a quarter of an hour. Master Zacharias found it difficult to calm her, but made her promise to keep on this subject a silence which she never was known to observe. So, though Gerard and Aubert were ignorant of it, all Geneva was soon talking of their speedy union. But it happened also that, while the worthy folk were gossiping, a strange chuckle was often heard, and a voice saying, Gerard will not wed Aubert. If the talkers turned round, they found themselves facing a little old man who was quite a stranger to them. How old was this singular being? No one could have told. People conjectured that he must have existed for several centuries, and that was all. His big flat head rested upon shoulders the width of which was equal to the height of his body. This was not above 3 feet. This personage would have made a good figure to support a pendulum, for the dial would have naturally been placed on his face, and the balance wheel would have oscillated at its ease in his chest. His nose might readily have been taken for the style of a sundial, for it was narrow and sharp. His teeth, far apart, resembled the cogs of a wheel and ground themselves between his lips. His voice had the metallic sound of a bell, and you could hear his heart beat like the tick of a clock. This little man, whose arms moved like the hands on a dial, walked with jerks without ever turning round. If anyone followed him, it was found that he walked a league an hour, and that his course was nearly circular. This strange being had not long been seen wandering, or rather circulating, around the town. But it had already been observed that, every day, at the moment when the sun passed the meridian, he stopped before the Cathedral of St. Pierre, and resumed his course after the 12 strokes of noon had sounded. Excepting at this precise moment, he seemed to become a part of all the conversations in which the old watchmaker was talked of, and people asked each other, in terror, what relation could exist between him and Master Zacharias. It was remarked, too, that he never lost sight of the old man and his daughter while they were taking their promenades. One day, Gerard perceived this monster looking at her with a hideous smile. She clung to her father with a frightened motion. "What is the matter, my Gerard?" asked Master Zacharias. "I do not know," replied the young girl. "But thou art changed, my child. Art thou going to fall ill in thy turn? Ah, well," he added with a sad smile, "then I must take care of thee, and I will do it tenderly." "Oh, father, it will be nothing. I am cold, and I imagine that it is." "What gerund?" "The presence of that man who always follows us," she replied in a low tone. Master Zacharias turned towards the little old man. "Faith, he goes well," said he with a satisfied air, "for it is just 4 o'clock. Fear nothing, my child, it is not a man, it is a clock." Gerard looked at her father in terror. How could Master Zacharias read the hour on this strange creature's visage? "By the by," continued the old watchmaker, paying no further attention to the matter, "I have not seen Aubert for several days." "He has not left us, however, father," said Gerard, whose thoughts turned into a gentler channel. "What is he doing then?" "He is working." "Ah," cried the old man, "he is at work repairing my watches, is he not? But he will never succeed, for it is not repair they need, but a resurrection." Gerard remained silent. "I must know," added the old man, "if they have brought back any more of those accursed watches upon which the devil has sent this epidemic." After these words, Master Zacharias fell into complete silence, till he knocked at the door of his house, and for the first time since his convalescence descended to his shop, while Gerard sadly repaired to her chamber. Just as Master Zacharias crossed the threshold of his shop, one of the many clocks suspended on the wall struck 5 o'clock. Usually the bells of these clocks, admirably regulated as they were, struck simultaneously, and this rejoiced the old man's heart. But on this day the bells struck one after another, so that for a quarter of an hour the ear was deafened by the successive noises. Master Zacharias suffered acutely. He could not remain still, but went from one clock to the other, and beat the time to them, like a conductor who no longer has control over his musicians. When the last had ceased striking, the door of the shop opened, and Master Zacharias shuddered from head to foot to see before him the little old man, who looked fixedly at him and said, "Master, may I not speak with you a few moments?" "Who are you?" asked the watchmaker abruptly. "A colleague. It is my business to regulate the sun." "Ah, you regulate the sun? replied Master Zacharias eagerly, without wincing. I can scarcely compliment you upon it. Your son goes badly, and in order to make ourselves agree with it, we have to keep putting our clocks forward so much or back so much. And by the cloven foot, cried this weird personage, you are right, my master. My son does not always mark noon at the same moment as your clocks, but some day it will be known that this is because of the inequality of the earth's transfer, and a mean noon will be invented which will regulate this irregularity. Shall I live till then? Asked the old man with glistening eyes. Without doubt, replied the little old man, laughing. Can you believe that you will ever die? Alas, I am very ill now. Ah, let us talk of that. By Beelzebub, that will lead to just what I wish to speak to you about. Saying this, the strange being leaped upon the old leather chair, and carried his legs one under the other, after the fashion of the bones which the painters of funeral hangings cross beneath death's heads. Then he resumed, in an ironical tone. Let us see, Master Zacharias, what is going on in this good town of Geneva? They say that your health is failing, that your watches have need of a doctor. Ah, do you believe that there is an intimate relation between their existence and mine? Cried Master Zacharias. Why, I imagine that these watches have faults, even vices. If these wantons do not preserve a regular conduct, it is right that they should bear the consequences of their irregularity. It seems to me that they have need of reforming a little. What do you call faults? Asked Master Zacharias, reddening at the sarcastic tone in which these words were uttered. Have they not a right to be proud of their origin? Not too proud, replied the little old man. They bear a celebrated name, and an illustrious signature is graven on their cases, it is true, and theirs is the exclusive privilege of being introduced among the noblest families. But for some time they have got out of order, and you can do nothing in the matter, Master Zacharias, and the stupidest apprentice in Geneva could prove it to you. To me, Master Zacharias, cried the old man with a flush of outraged pride. To you, Master Zacharias, you, who cannot restore life to your watches. But it is because I have a fever, and so have they also, replied the old man as a cold sweat broke out upon him. Very well, they will die with you, since you cannot impart a little elasticity to their springs. Die? No, for you yourself have said it. I cannot die. I, the first watchmaker in the world. I who, by means of these pieces and diverse wheels, have been able to regulate the movement with absolute precision. Have I not subjected time to exact laws, and can I not dispose of it like a despot? Before a sublime genius had arranged these wandering hours regularly, in what vast uncertainty was human destiny plunged? At what certain moment could the acts of life be connected with each other? But you, man or devil, whatever you may be, have never considered the magnificence of my art, which calls every science to its aid. No, no, I, Master Zacharias, cannot die, for, as I have regulated time, time would end with me. It would return to the infinite, whence my genius has rescued it, and it would lose itself irreparably in the abyss of nothingness. No, I can no more die than the creator of this universe that submitted to his laws. I have become his equal, and I have partaken of his power. If God has created eternity, Master Zacharias has created time. The old watchmaker now resembled the fallen angel, defiant in the presence of the Creator. The little old man gazed at him, and even seemed to breathe into him this impious transport. Well said, master, he replied. Beelzebub had less right than you to compare himself with God. Your glory must not perish. So your servant here desires to give you the method of controlling these rebellious watches. What is it? What is it? Cried Master Zacharias. You shall know on the day after that on which you have given me your daughter's hand. My gerund. Herself. My daughter's heart is not free, replied Master Zacharias, who seemed neither astonished nor shocked at the strange demand. Bah, she is not the least beautiful of watches, but she will end by stopping also. My daughter, my gerund, no. Well, return to your watches, Master Zacharias, adjust and readjust them. Get ready the marriage of your daughter and your apprentice. Temper your springs with your best steel. Bless Aubert and the pretty gerund. But remember, your watches will never go, and gerund will not wed Aubert. Thereupon the little old man disappeared, but not so quickly that Master Zacharias could not hear 6 o'clock strike in his breast. Chapter 4. The Church of St. Pierre. Meanwhile, Master Zacharias became more feeble in mind and body every day. An unusual excitement, indeed, impelled him to continue his work more eagerly than ever, nor could his daughter entice him from it. His pride was still more aroused after the crisis to which his strange visitor had hurried him so treacherously, and he resolved to overcome, by the force of genius, the malign influence which weighed upon his work and himself. He first repaired to the various clocks of the town, which were confided to his care. He made sure, by a scrupulous examination, that the wheels were in good condition, the pivots firm, the weights exactly balanced. Every part, even to the bells, was examined with the minute attention of a physician studying the breast of a patient. Nothing indicated that these clocks were on the point of being affected by inactivity. Gerard and Aubert often accompanied the old man on these visits. He would no doubt have been pleased to see them eager to go with him, and certainly he would not have been so much absorbed in his approaching end had he thought that his existence was to be prolonged by that of these cherished ones, and had he understood that something of the life of a father always remains in his children. The old watchmaker, on returning home, resumed his labors with feverish zeal. Though persuaded that he would not succeed, it yet seemed to him impossible that this could be so, and he unceasingly took to pieces the watches which were brought to his shop and put them together again. Aubert tortured his mind in vain to discover the causes of the evil. "Master," said he, "this can only come from the wear of the pivots and gearing." "Do you want then to kill me little by little?" replied Master Zacharias passionately. "Are these watches child's work? Was it lest I should hurt my fingers that I worked the surface of these copper pieces in the lathe? Have I not forged these pieces of copper myself so as to obtain a greater strength? Are not these springs tempered to a rare perfection? Could anybody have used finer oils than mine? You must yourself agree that it is impossible, and you avow, in short, that the devil is in it." From morning till night discontented purchasers besieged the house, and they got access to the old watchmaker himself, who knew not which of them to listen to. From morning till night discontented purchasers besieged the house. "This watch loses, and I cannot succeed in regulating it," said one. "This," said another, "is absolutely obstinate and stands still, as did Joshua's son." "If it is true," said most of them, "that your health has an influence on that of your watches, Master Zacharias, get well as soon as possible." The old man gazed at these people with haggard eyes, and only replied by shaking his head or by a few sad words. "Wait till the first fine weather, my friends. The season is coming which revives existence in wearied bodies. We want the sun to warm us all." "A fine thing if my watches are to be ill through the winter," said one of the most angry. "Do you know, Master Zacharias, that your name is inscribed in full on their faces? By the Virgin, you do little honor to your signature." It happened at last that the old man, abashed by these reproaches, took some pieces of gold from his old trunk and began to buy back the damaged watches. At news of this, the customers came in a crowd, and the poor watchmaker's money fast melted away, but his honesty remained intact. Gerard warmly praised his delicacy, which was leading him straight towards ruin, and Aubert soon offered his own savings to his master. "What will become of my daughter?" said Master Zacharias, clinging now and then in the shipwreck to his paternal love. Aubert dared not answer that he was full of hope for the future and of deep devotion to Gerard. Master Zacharias would have that day called him his son-in-law, and thus refuted the sad prophecy, which still buzzed in his ears. Gerard will not wed Aubert. By this plan, the watchmaker at last succeeded in entirely despoiling himself. His antique vases passed into the hands of strangers. He deprived himself of the richly carved panels which adorned the walls of his house. Some primitive pictures of the early Flemish painters soon ceased to please his daughter's eyes, and everything, even the precious tools that his genius had invented, were sold to indemnify the clamorous customers. Scholastique alone refused to listen to reason on the subject, but her efforts failed to prevent the unwelcome visitors from reaching her master, and from soon departing with some valuable object. Then her chattering was heard in all the streets of the neighborhood, where she had long been known. She eagerly denied the rumors of sorcery and magic on the part of Master Zacharias, which gained currency. But as at bottom she was persuaded of their truth, she said her prayers over and over again to redeem her pious falsehoods. It had been noticed that for some time the old watchmaker had neglected his religious duties. Time was when he had accompanied Gerard to church, and had seemed to find in prayer the intellectual charm which it imparts to thoughtful minds, since it is the most sublime exercise of the imagination. This voluntary neglect of holy practices, added to the secret habits of his life, had in some sort confirmed the accusations leveled against his labors. So, with the double purpose of drawing her father back to God and to the world, Gerund resolved to call religion to her aid. She thought that it might give some vitality to his dying soul, but the dogmas of faith and humility had to combat, in the soul of Master Zacharias, an insurmountable pride, and came into collision with that vanity of science which connects everything with itself, without rising to the infinite source whence first principles flow. It was under these circumstances that the young girl undertook her father's conversion, and her influence was so effective that the old watchmaker promised to attend high mass at the cathedral on the following Sunday. Gerand was in an ecstasy, as if heaven had opened to her view. Old Scholastique could not contain her joy, and at last found irrefutable arguments against the gossiping tongues which accused her master of impiety. She spoke of it to her neighbors, her friends, her enemies, to those whom she knew not as well as to those whom she knew. In faith, we scarcely believe what you tell us, Dame Scholastique, they replied. Master Zacharias has always acted in concert with the devil. You haven't counted, then, replied the old servant, the fine bells which strike for my master's clocks? How many times they have struck the hours of prayer and the Mass? No doubt, they would reply. But has he not invented machines which go all by themselves, and which actually do the work of a real man? Could a child of the devil, exclaimed Dame Scholastique wrathfully, have executed the fine iron clock of the Chateau of Andernach, which the town of Geneva was not rich enough to buy? A pious motto appeared at each hour, and a Christian who obeyed them would have gone straight to paradise. Is that the work of the devil? This masterpiece, made 20 years before, had carried Master Zacharias's fame to its acme, but even then there had been accusations of sorcery against him. But at least the old man's visit to the cathedral ought to reduce malicious tongues to silence. Master Zacharias, having doubtless forgotten the promise made to his daughter, had returned to his shop. After being convinced of his powerlessness to give life to his watches, he resolved to try if he could not make some new ones. He abandoned all those useless works, and devoted himself to the completion of the crystal watch, which he intended to be his masterpiece. But in vain did he use his most perfect tools and employ rubies and diamonds for resisting friction. The watch fell from his hands the first time that he attempted to wind it up. The old man concealed this circumstance from everyone, even from his daughter, but from that time his health rapidly declined. There were only the last oscillations of a pendulum, which goes slower when nothing restores its original force. It seemed as if the laws of gravity, acting directly upon him, were dragging him irresistibly down to the grave. The Sunday so ardently anticipated by Gerand at last arrived. The weather was fine, and the temperature inspiriting. The people of Geneva were passing quietly through the streets, gaily chatting about the return of spring. Gerand, tenderly taking the old man's arm, directed her steps towards the cathedral, while Scholastique followed behind with the prayer books. People looked curiously at them as they passed. The old watchmaker permitted himself to be led like a child, or rather like a blind man. The faithful of St. Pierre were almost frightened when they saw him cross the threshold and shrank back at his approach. The chants of high mass were already resounding through the church. Gerand went to her accustomed bench and kneeled with profound and simple reverence. Master Zacharias remained standing upright beside her. The ceremonies continued with the majestic solemnity of that faithful age, but the old man had no faith. He did not implore the pity of heaven with cries of anguish of the Kyrie. He did not, with the Gloria in Excelsis, sing the splendors of the heavenly heights. The reading of the Testament did not draw him from his materialistic reverie, and he forgot to join in the homage of the Credo. This proud old man remained motionless, as insensible and silent as a stone statue. And even at the solemn moment when the bell announced the miracle of transubstantiation, he did not bow his head, but gazed directly at the sacred host which the priest raised above the heads of the faithful. Jaron looked at her father, and a flood of tears moistened her missal. At this moment the clock of St. Pierre struck 11:30. Master Zacharias turned quickly towards this ancient clock which still spoke. It seemed to him as if its face was gazing steadily at him. The figures of the hours shone as if they had been engraved in lines of fire, and the hands shot forth electric sparks from their sharp points. This proud old man remained motionless. The Mass ended. It was customary for the Angelus to be said at noon, and the priests, before leaving the altar, waited for the clock to strike the hour of 12. In a few moments, this prayer would ascend to the feet of the Virgin. But suddenly, a harsh noise was heard. Master Zacharias uttered a piercing cry. The large hand of the clock, having reached 12, had abruptly stopped, and the clock did not strike the hour. Gerund hastened to her father's aid. He had fallen down motionless, and they carried him outside the church. "It is the death blow," murmured Gerund, sobbing. When he had been borne home, Master Zacharias lay upon his bed utterly crushed. Life seemed only to still exist on the surface of his body, like the last whiffs of smoke about a lamp just extinguished. When he came to his senses, Aubert and Gerund were leaning over him. In these last moments, the future took in his eyes the shape of the present. He saw his daughter alone, without a protector. "My son," said he to Aubert, "I give my daughter to thee." So saying, he stretched out his hands towards his two children, who were thus united at his deathbed. But soon, Master Zacharias lifted himself up in a paroxysm of rage. The words of the little old man recurred to his mind. "I do not wish to die," he cried. "I cannot die. I, Master Zacharias, ought not to die. My books, my accounts." With these words, he sprang from his bed towards a book, in which the names of his customers and the articles which had been sold to them were inscribed. He seized it and rapidly turned over its leaves, and his emaciated finger fixed itself on one of the pages. "There," he cried, "there, this old iron clock sold to Pitnaxio. It is the only one that has not been returned to me. It still exists, it goes, it lives. Ah, I wish for it, I must find it. I will take such care of it that death will no longer seek me." And he fainted away. Aubert and Gerund knelt by the old man's bedside and prayed together. Chapter 5. The Hour of Deaths. Several days passed, and Master Zacharias, though almost dead, rose from his bed and returned to active life under a supernatural excitement. He lived by pride. But Gerund did not deceive herself. Her father's body and soul were forever lost. The old man got together his last remaining resources, without thought of those who were dependent upon him. He betrayed an incredible energy, walking, ferreting about, and mumbling strange, incomprehensible words. One morning Gerund went down to his shop. Master Zacharias was not there. She waited for him all day. Master Zacharias did not return. Gerund wept bitterly, but her father did not reappear. Aubert searched everywhere through the town, and soon came to the sad conviction that the old man had left it. "Let us find my father," cried Gerund, when the young apprentice told her this sad news. "Where can he be?" Aubert asked himself. An inspiration suddenly came to his mind. He remembered the last words which Master Zacharias had spoken. The old man only lived now in the old iron clock that had not been returned. Master Zacharias must have gone in search of it. Aubert spoke of this to Gerund. "Let us look at my father's book," she replied. They descended to the shop. The book was open on the bench. All the watches or clocks made by the old man, and which had been returned to him because they were out of order, were stricken out excepting one. "Sold to M. Pitnaxio, an iron clock with bell and moving figures, sent to his chateau at Andernach." It was this moral clock of which Scholastique had spoken with so much enthusiasm. "My father is there," cried Gerund. "Let us hasten thither," replied Aubert. "We may still save him." "Not for this life," murmured Gerund, "but at least for the other." "By the mercy of God, Gerund, the chateau of Andernach stands in the gorge of the dense Midi, 20 hours from Geneva. Let us go." That very evening Aubert and Gerund, followed by the old servant, set out on foot by the road which skirts Lake Leman. They accomplished 5 leagues during the night, stopping neither at Bessinge nor at Erments, where rises the famous chateau of the Mayers. They with difficulty forded the torrent of the Drance, and everywhere they went they inquired for Master Zacharias, and were soon convinced that they were on his track. The next morning, at daybreak, having passed Thonon, they reached Evian, whence the Swiss territory may be seen extended over 12 leagues. But the two betrothed did not even perceive the enchanting prospect. They went straight forward, urged on by a supernatural force. Aubert, leaning on a knotty stick, offered his arm alternately to Gerund and to Scholastique, and he made the greatest efforts to sustain his companions. All three talked of their sorrow, of their hopes, and thus passed along the beautiful road by the waterside, and across the narrow plateau which unites the borders of the lake with the heights of the Chalet. They soon reached Bouveret, where the Rhône enters the Lake of Geneva. On leaving this town, they diverged from the lake, and their weariness increased amid these mountain districts. Vianaz, Chesset, Colombay, half-lost villages, were soon left behind. Meanwhile, their knees shook, their feet were lacerated by the sharp points which covered the ground like a brushwood of granite, but no trace of Master Zacharias. He must be found, however, and the two young people did not seek repose either in the isolated hamlets or at the Chateau of Monthey, which, with its dependencies, formed the appanage of Margaret of Savoy. At last, late in the day and half dead with fatigue, they reached the hermitage of Notre Dame du Sex, which is situated at the base of the dense Dumidi, 600 feet above the Rhône. The hermit received the three wanderers as night was falling. They could not have gone another step, and here they must needs rest. The hermit could give them no news of Master Zacharias. They could scarcely hope to find him still living amid these sad solitudes. The night was dark, the wind howled amid the mountains, and the avalanches roared down from the summits of the broken crags. Aubert and Gerand, crouching before the hermit's hearth, told him their melancholy tale. Their mantles, covered with snow, were drying in a corner, and without, the hermit's dog barked lugubriously and mingled his voice with that of the tempest. Pride, said the hermit to his guests, has destroyed an angel created for good. It is the stumbling block against which the destinies of man strike. You cannot reason with pride, the principal of all the vices, since, by its very nature, the proud man refuses to listen to it. It only remains, then, to pray for your father. All four knelt down, when the barking of the dog redoubled, and someone knocked at the door of the hermitage. Open, in the devil's name. The door yielded under the blows, and a disheveled, haggard, ill-clothed man appeared. My father, cried Gerand. It was Master Zacharias. Where am I? Said he. In eternity, time is ended, the hours no longer strike, the hands have stopped. Father, returned Gerand, with so piteous an emotion that the old man seemed to return to the world of the living. Thou here, Gerand, he cried, and thou, Aubert? Ah, my dear betrothed ones, you are going to be married in our old church. Father, said Gerand, seizing him by the arm, come home to Geneva, come with us. The old man tore away from his daughter's embrace and hurried towards the door, on the threshold of which the snow was falling in large flakes. Do not abandon your children, cried Aubert. Why return, replied the old man sadly, to those places which my life has already quitted, and where a part of myself is forever buried? Your soul is not dead, said the hermit solemnly. My soul, oh no, its wheels are good, I perceive it beating regularly. Your soul is immaterial, your soul is immortal, replied the hermit sternly. Yes, like my glory, but it is shut up in the chateau of Andernat, and I wish to see it again. The hermit crossed himself, Scholastique became almost inanimate, Aubert held Gerand in his arms. The chateau of Andernat is inhabited by one who is lost, said the hermit, one who does not salute the cross of my hermitage. My father, go not thither. I want my soul is mine. Hold my father, cried Gerand. But the old man had leaped across the threshold, and plunged into the night, crying, Mine, mine, my soul. Gerand, Aubert, and Scholastique hastened after him. They went by difficult paths, across which Master Zacharias sped like a tempest, urged by an irresistible force. The snow raged around them, and mingled its white flakes with the froth of the swollen torrents. As they passed the chapel erected in memory of the massacre of the Theban legion, they hurriedly crossed themselves. Master Zacharias was not to be seen. At last the village of Evianas appeared in the midst of this sterile region. The hardest heart would have been moved to see this hamlet, lost among these horrible solitudes. The old man sped on, and plunged into the deepest gorge of the dense Dumidi, which pierced the sky with their sharp peaks. Soon a ruin, old and gloomy as the rocks at its base, rose before him. It is there, he cried, hastening his pace still more frantically. It is there. The chateau of Andernat was a ruin even then. A thick, crumbling tower rose above it, and seemed to menace with its downfall the old gables which reared themselves below. The vast piles of jagged stones were gloomy to look on. Several dark halls appeared amid the debris, with caved-in ceilings, now become the abode of vipers. A low and narrow postern, opening upon a ditch choked with rubbish, gave access to the chateau. Who had dwelt there none knew. No doubt some margrave, half-lord, half-brigand had sojourned in it. To the margrave had succeeded bandits or counterfeit coiners, who had been hanged on the scene of their crime. The legend went that, on winter nights, Satan came to lead his diabolical dances on the slope of the deep gorges in which the shadow of these ruins was engulfed. But Master Zacharias was not dismayed by their sinister aspect. He reached the postern. No one forbade him to pass. A spacious and gloomy court presented itself to his eyes. No one forbade him to cross it. He passed along the kind of inclined plane which conducted to one of the long corridors, whose arches seemed to banish daylight from beneath their heavy springings. His advance was unresisted. Gerund, Aubert, and Scholastique closely followed him. Master Zacharias, as if guided by an irresistible hand, seemed sure of his way and strode along with rapid step. He reached an old worm-eaten door, which fell before his blows, whilst the bats described oblique circles around his head. An immense hall, better preserved than the rest, was soon reached. High sculptured panels, on which serpents, ghouls, and other strange figures seemed to disport themselves confusedly, covered its walls. Several long and narrow windows, like loopholes, shivered beneath the bursts of the tempest. Master Zacharias, on reaching the middle of this hall, uttered a cry of joy. On an iron support, fastened to the wall, stood the clock in which now resided his entire life. This unequaled masterpiece represented an ancient Roman church, with buttresses of wrought iron, with its heavy bell tower, where there was a complete chime for the anthem of the day, the Angelus, the Mass, Vespers, Compline, and the Benediction. Above the church door, which opened at the hour of the services, was placed a rose, in the center of which two hands moved, and the archivolt of which reproduced the 12 hours of the face sculptured in relief. Between the door and the rose, just as Scholastique had said, a maxim, relative to the employment of every moment of the day, appeared on a copper plate. Master Zacharias had once regulated this succession of devices with a really Christian solicitude. The hours of prayer, of work, of repast, of recreation, and of repose followed each other according to the religious discipline, and were to infallibly ensure salvation to him who scrupulously observed their commands. Master Zacharias, intoxicated with joy, went forward to take possession of the clock, when a frightful roar of laughter resounded behind him. He turned, and by the light of a smoky lamp, recognized the little old man of Geneva. "You here?" cried he. Gerund was afraid. She drew closer to Aubert. "Good day, Master Zacharias," said the monster. "Who are you?" "Signor Pitnaxio, at your service. You have come to give me your daughter. You have remembered my words. Gerund will not wed Aubert." The young apprentice rushed upon Pitnaxio, who escaped from him like a shadow. "Stop, Aubert," cried Master Zacharias. "Good night," said Pitnaxio, and he disappeared. "My father, let us fly from this hateful place," cried Gerund, "my father." Master Zacharias was no longer there. He was pursuing the phantom of Pitnaxio across the rickety corridors. Scholastique, Gerund, and Aubert remained, speechless and fainting, in the large, gloomy hall. The young girl had fallen upon a stone seat. The old servant knelt beside her and prayed. Aubert remained erect, watching his betrothed. Pale lights wandered in the darkness, and the silence was only broken by the movements of the little animals which live in old wood, and the noise of which marks the hours of death watch. When daylight came, they ventured upon the endless staircase which wound beneath these ruined masses. For 2 hours they wandered thus without meeting a living soul, and hearing only a far-off echo responding to their cries. Sometimes they found themselves buried 100 feet below the ground, and sometimes they reached places whence they could overlook the wild mountains. Chance brought them at last back again to the vast hall, which had sheltered them during this night of anguish. It was no longer empty. Master Zacharias and Pitnaxio were talking there together, the one upright and rigid as a corpse, the other crouching over a marble table. Master Zacharias, when he perceived Gerund, went forward and took her by the hand and led her towards Pitnaxio, saying, "Behold your lord and master, my daughter. Gerund, behold your husband." Gerund shuddered from head to foot. "Never," cried Aubert, "for she is my betrothed." "Never," responded Gerund, like a plaintive echo. Pitnaxio began to laugh. "You wish me to die, then?" exclaimed the old man. "There, in that clock, the last which goes of all which have gone from my hands, my life is shut up, and this man tells me, when I have thy daughter, this clock shall belong to thee. and this man will not rewind it. He can break it and plunge me into chaos. Ah, my daughter, you no longer love me. My father, murmured Gerand, recovering consciousness. If you knew what I have suffered, far away from this principle of my existence, resumed the old man, perhaps no one looked after this timepiece. Perhaps its springs were left to wear out, its wheels to get clogged. But now in my own hands I can nourish this health so dear, for I must not die, I the great watchmaker of Geneva. Look, my daughter, how these hands advance with certain step. See, 5 o'clock is about to strike. Listen well and look at the maxim which is about to be revealed. 5 o'clock struck with a noise which resounded sadly in Gerand's soul, and these words appeared in red letters. You must eat of the fruits of the tree of science. Aubert and Gerand looked at each other stupefied. These were no longer the pious sayings of the Catholic watchmaker. The breath of Satan must have passed over it, but Zacharias paid no attention to this and resumed. Dost thou hear, my Gerand? I live, I still live. Listen to my breathing, see the blood circulating in my veins. No, thou wouldst not kill thy father, and thou wilt accept this man for thy husband, so that I may become immortal and at last attain the power of God. At these blasphemous words, old Scholastique crossed herself, and Pitnaxio laughed aloud with joy. And then, Gerand, thou wilt be happy with him. See this man, he is time, thy existence will be regulated with absolute precision. Gerand, since I gave thee life, give life to thy father. See this man, he is time. Gerand, murmured Aubert, I am thy betrothed. He is my father, replied Gerand, fainting. She is thine, said Master Zacharias. Pitnaxio, then wilt keep thy promise. Here is the key of the clock, replied the horrible man. Master Zacharias seized the long key, which resembled an uncoiled snake, and ran to the clock, which he hastened to wind up with fantastic rapidity. The creaking of the spring jarred upon the nerves. The old watchmaker wound and wound the key, without stopping a moment, and it seemed as if the movement were beyond his control. He wound more and more quickly, with strange contortions, until he fell from sheer weariness. There, it is wound up for a century, he cried. Aubert rushed from the hall as if he were mad. After long wandering, he found the outlet of the hateful chateau, and hastened into the open air. He returned to the hermitage of Notre Dame du Sex, and talked so despairingly to the holy recluse, that the latter consented to return with him to the chateau of Andernach. If, during these hours of anguish, Gerand had not wept, it was because her tears were exhausted. Master Zacharias had not left the hall. He ran every moment to listen to the regular beating of the old clock. Meanwhile the clock had struck, and to Scholastique's great terror, these words had appeared on the silver face. Man ought to become the equal of God. The old man had not only not been shocked by these impious maxims, but read them deliriously, and flattered himself with thoughts of pride, whilst Pitnaxio kept close by him. The marriage contract was to be signed at midnight. Gerand, almost unconscious, saw or heard nothing. The silence was only broken by the old man's words and the chuckling of Pitnaxio. 11 o'clock struck. Master Zacharias shuddered and read in a loud voice. Man should be the slave of science, and sacrifice to it relatives and family. Yes, he cried, there is nothing but science in this world. The hands slipped over the face of the clock with the hiss of a serpent, and the pendulum beat with accelerated strokes. Master Zacharias no longer spoke. He had fallen to the floor, his throat rattled, and from his oppressed bosom came only these half-broken words, life, science. The scene had now two new witnesses, the hermit and Aubert. Master Zacharias lay upon the floor. Gerand was praying beside him, more dead than alive. Of a sudden a dry, hard noise was heard, which preceded the strike. Master Zacharias sprang up. Midnights, he cried. The hermit stretched out his hand towards the old clock, and midnight did not sound. Master Zacharias uttered a terrible cry, which must have been heard in hell, when these words appeared. Whoever shall attempt to make himself the equal of God shall be forever damned. The old clock burst with a noise like thunder, and the spring, escaping, leaped across the hall with 1,000 fantastic contortions. The old man rose, ran after it, trying in vain to seize it, and exclaiming, my soul, my soul. The spring bounded before him, first on one side, then on the other, and he could not reach it. At last Pitnaxio seized it, and, uttering a horrible blasphemy, engulfed himself in the earth. Master Zacharias fell backwards. He was dead. He was dead. The old watchmaker was buried in the midst of the peaks of Andernach.